My name's Oliver Seligman. I'm the author of Befriending Bipolar, and today I'm going to talk about bipolar stigma. When I was at university, I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. I thought it would be a really good career to help people, and I thought I'd be pretty good at it. I got a first class in a Bachelor of Science, and I'd done lots of work experience in doctors' surgeries and in hospital. I had very good references, and although it was very competitive to get into medical school, I thought I had a pretty good chance, and I thought I'll certainly get some interviews. So I filled out the UCAS form, as it was in those days, and applied to 5 universities to read medicine. Now at the same time, an ex-girlfriend of mine at university asked me to help her with filling out her application. So I did that. I thought that her application was strong, and I thought that my application was strong as well. Now a few months later, having written under the section, "Do you have any medical conditions you want to tell us about?" Well, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but it's stable and has been for a few years. After a few months, I got my replies, and I got a no from every single university I'd applied to, including Newcastle, where I was at university. And she was offered interviews, I think in 4 out of the 5 universities that she'd applied for, and she actually ended up passing a medical course, and I think she's a doctor to this day. Now the only reason I can think that I was rejected, particularly from not even getting an interview, was because I'd said that I had bipolar, and whoever processed the interviews just thought, no, someone with bipolar can't do this course, there's no way. Had I had some interviews and then been rejected, I think it could easily have happened for other reasons than bipolar. They might have thought I was too young or too immature. They might have just thought I wasn't really cut out for it. But the fact that I didn't get an interview was a pretty strong indication that I was stigmatized for it. Now, there have been times in my life when I was grateful for not getting into medical school, because in Britain particularly, young doctors have to work ridiculously hard. They're under a lot of pressure, and it's maybe not the perfect environment for someone with bipolar. Now, I believe that if I was magically qualified as a doctor now, I could make a very good GP. I'd probably work very part-time. I don't think I would ever be a brain surgeon who was on call for days on end. I don't think I would probably work in accident and emergency, because I think the stress might just be way too much for me. But to do something where people's lives aren't directly depending on me and on me being well, something where there's a certain amount of leeway if I need to take a break or a sabbatical or time off work because of bad health, well, I think that could be a tremendous benefit to my patients, particularly the ones with mental illness, and that they might feel very met dealing with a doctor with bipolar. When I was younger, my second story, after I failed to get into medical school, was I wanted to be a Royal Marine. Now, I'd been in the Territorial Army for 4 years. I was an officer there. Once again, as soon as I filled out the form asking, do you have any medical conditions that we should know about, that was it. A few weeks later, I got a very nice letter saying, I'm afraid we cannot have people in the army with serious mental illnesses, or in the Royal Marines with serious mental illnesses. It's actually part of the Navy. And I'm afraid, you can't go any further. Now, I could also say that this was stigma, but I don't see it that way at all. I think it was a very, very good thing that I didn't get into the Royal Marines. You have to be very tough, very mentally strong, very resilient, and very stable to be a Royal Marine. I mean, they really are very elite. And to have me on lithium, being put under a lot of pressure, having to do a lot of physical stuff, a lot of mental exhaustion, it's just not a good idea to have someone with bipolar doing that. And particularly when you're talking about using automatic weapons and throwing grenades and jumping out of helicopters and all these things. And so those are two examples of being rejected from something I wanted to do because of bipolar. And one of them I do now see as stigma, and the other I just see as a sensible decision. Because as someone with bipolar, it's wise that I do acknowledge that I have limitations. It's not good for me to be put under prolonged pressure. It's not good for me to be heavily relied on. Other people's lives relied on me being in good form, me being in good health. And this may be the case with medicine. It may be that it still isn't sensible to study a medical degree with bipolar type 1. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who have done. And it would be really interesting to hear how they get on with being a doctor, and if the illness makes a big difference to them, or if they can still offer a lot. At the time when these things happened, I was a bit disappointed, but I didn't really think so much about it. I actually ended up going and getting a job as a sales trader in a big investment bank in London and New York, which is an equally stressful area to be in many ways, and that actually didn't go very well. But I want to talk a bit about stigma and how we perceive it, because there's no doubt that stigma exists, and certainly in many, many countries, being bipolar or having a mental illness actually means you get persecuted. I mean, you get treated really, really badly. And in this video, I'm not talking about those countries. I'm talking about my experiences in the UK. But one thing I have seen is that our internal attitude to stigma is very, very important as to how much of it we experience and also how we experience it. There are some people I know who believe very strongly that there's a lot of stigma out there against people with bipolar, and inevitably they see it a lot. It certainly seems to me that the beliefs we have, they do tend to change the way we experience life. If someone is generally quite negative, or someone feels that the world is against them, then they will often have experiences where that is confirmed. And so if we believe very strongly that there's a lot of stigma out there, and if we're oversensitive to this stigma, then the chances are we will experience more of it. And even if we don't, we will believe that there's plenty of it in the world. And we will probably suffer from it, because it will probably keep us up at night sometimes and stress us out and make us feel that the world in some ways is against us. Whereas if we have more inner confidence, we can still recognize that there is stigma out there, and there's stigma towards almost everyone in the world in some way or other. But we don't have to take it so personally. We can not get into that medical degree or not get into that career we wanted, and then dust ourselves down and find something else. And I think generally speaking, this is a pretty healthy way to live life. But this brings me on to my next point. Sometimes we need to stand up to stigma. I would certainly never advocate just rolling over and taking a situation where we were heavily stigmatized and just sort of not saying anything about it, or just meekly walking away. Sometimes we need to address it. Now, something I could have done had I realized it was possible is I could have contacted the medical schools who said no, and I could have really dug deeper and hoped to find out why. And it might have been that then they told me, well, actually, we just don't think a medical degree, this would have been in 1998, is suitable for someone with bipolar. We just think the pressure's too much. We think it's too big a risk. Or it could have been that they actually had a completely valid reason that I haven't thought of, and they could have explained it that way. Or maybe I wouldn't have got any kind of true answer out of them. But it would have been a good idea to address it. It would have been a good idea to be curious and to find out. And had they said that it was because of bipolar, then I would have at least had the chance to put my case forward. To explain bipolar from a place of calm and from our own experience can be really powerful, and it can actually help people see their prejudices and sometimes get over them. And even if they don't get over them, even if they listen to us but really they're not very interested, we're not losing our centre, we're not losing our peace about it, and then we can dust ourselves down and just get on with life. You know, when I'm aware that it's important to be calm and balanced when I'm explaining bipolar to someone, or to find inner stability in situations where I just want to react emotionally, when I'm aware of that, then it means I have more of a choice in it. I also think there's a lot to be said for the more peaceful and balanced we are inside, the less negativity in general we experience. And if we do experience stigma, the easier it is to explain ourselves and put our point forward and perhaps help someone overcome that stigma. So one final way to deal with stigma, which I think is fantastic and is not talked about very much, and that is using our sense of humour. Humour has an amazing way to solve problems and diffuse situations that are potentially very emotional, very emotive. I am quite happy to laugh about bipolar. I'm quite happy to joke about the strange things that I experienced in mental hospital. I actually do that in my book, Befriending Bipolar, which is in many ways a very serious book that addresses mental illness and mental health. But it's so helpful to put a bit of humour in there. And I know so many people with bipolar who have great senses of humour, because we've been through the mill. We know what it's like to suffer. And that often develops an ability to laugh at ourselves and laugh at life. And honestly, when bad things happen, when we're stigmatised, when we don't get those jobs we want, or when someone's rude to us just because we have a mental illness, then we can laugh it off, and it doesn't need to affect us so badly. So I guess I'm going to sum up by saying there are lots of different aspects to stigma. If you've experienced bipolar stigma at all, please write in the comments, please share your story. It would be very interesting to hear other people's points of view, not just mine. We're living in a world where there is less and less stigma, where there's more pressure on organisations and people to accept people with mental illness. And so I'm optimistic about the future, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks for listening.